Good evening, everyone, or whatever time you're watching this at. I'm Jayhawk Bazin, aka Captain Brady, for roleplay purposes. Today I'm going to be explaining aviation pathways in Project Kodiak, which is obviously the roleplay community that I'm working on, or that I'm running right now with a few other people, specifically for the Coast Guard. Because a lot of people have questions, and this will cover both enlisted opportunities and also pathways to becoming a pilot as an officer. So, quick introduction for those who don't know, Project Kodiak is a 1-1 replica of the east coast of Kodiak Island, Alaska. We focus on the Coast Guard, however, we have a strong community of businesses, government, emergency services, and so much more, including, of course, civilian aviation, which includes businesses, and fishing opportunities. We also have other maritime industries, such as ferries, which are being implemented here soon, and commercial fishing companies with much larger boats. So there's so much you can do in this group aside from just flying in the Coast Guard. In fact, we have a bunch of businesses that revolve around aviation on the civilian side, such as tours and offshore oil rig transport. So there's a lot to do. You can also just fly for fun as a hobby by completing flight school at Kodiak, which is done through the airport. So check out their Discord if you're interested. So missions for the Coast Guard side of things, which is what we'll be talking about today. Oh, that's my bad. So there we go. Missions. For missions, we have maritime search and rescue, environmental protection, surveying specifically. So like if an oil rig disaster happens or something, they use the helicopters to kind of scout out the situation. Medevac support for emergency services. So if a really bad injury were to happen in like Women's Bay, which is the town, or something, they can call in our helicopters and we can land there and pick up the people and transport them to a higher level of care, which would be like the base healthcare clinic. And we also provide a training support platform for like our rescue swimmers provide medical training to other elements of the community. We also provide training support by using our helicopters as platforms to do hoist training with the small boat team that's being implemented here soon. So there's a lot to do besides just doing some hoists from the water. For airframes available, we have 3 airframes that the Coast Guard primarily uses. The ones we don't use are mainly in the fixed wing category, which is the Spartan or Ocean Sentry, and then the Spartan. But they don't have those at Kodiak. We have every airframe that exists at Kodiak, which is the C-130J Hercules, which is this aircraft, this fixed-wing asset right here. You see uh, one of the very few C-130s you can find that has a Coast Guard livery on it. We have the H-65 Dolphin, which is this iconic helicopter right here doing the hoist with the person in it, a rescue swimmer. And we have the MH-60 Tango Jayhawk, which is these two Black Hawk-looking helicopters over here, which are probably the most widely used in the Coast Guard. So a lot of airframes to work on, and then we'll get into what you can do on those airframes on the next slide. So enlisted pathways. There's a couple of jobs you can do in the Coast Guard here in Kodiak that doesn't require you becoming an officer, and these jobs can get you flying positions as well. So we have aviation maintenance technician, which on the ground, whichever airframe they're assigned to, their job kind of varies. However, most of the time, their core functions are serving as air crewmen, refueling the aircraft they work on, repairing it, making sure it's ready for flight. So as soon as we get in the game for server startup, these guys, both the avionics electrical technicians, which is an AET, and then the aviation maintenance technician, which is an AMT, both these guys, as soon as we get in game and they have the aircraft they're assigned to for today, they are going to immediately start preparing their aircraft because we have an on-alert aircraft, which is the aircraft that needs to be ready at a moment's notice to respond to a call. As an aircrewman and pilot, you're assigned to a specific airframe. However, if like your crew's missing or something, you'll be reassigned to a different aircraft for that day, so you can actually do something. And then the last job we have, which is the more well-known, is the aviation survival technician, and this is basically the person who performs rescue swimmer duties, but also will ensure like the rescue hoist is operating well. Um, They are trained in TACMed, which is the system we use. It's an ACS medical system. It's much more advanced than like Mott Medical or the basic system. So they're trained as EMTs in that system. So ASTs, they do rescue swimmer training, of course, which is about 30 minutes. However, they get about 60 to 90 minutes of EMT material training, because most of they spend like maybe 5 to 10 minutes doing the rescue, and then the rest of their time they're performing medical uh, procedures or whatever you want to call it. They're practicing their medical. So we move on to the aircrew opportunities. So all those jobs I went over, do maintenance or rescue swimmer and stuff. However, oh, I apologize for that. There is some differences in what you can do. So for example, AET, which is your avionics electrical technician, they can become qualified as a hoist operator, mission system operator, flight engineer, or loadmaster, and I'll go over what all these are. So the big difference, people think clicking AET, if there's less people who want to do it, will get them hoist operator quicker. If you're trying to do like becoming a hoist operator faster by clicking AMT or AET, it's not going to work really well because everyone who's trying to go for hoist operator is waiting in the same wait list still. So moving on from that, hoist operator does what you see in the bottom right photo. They work on helicopters because they're the ones with the hoist. They basically are by the door. They deploy the hoist from the helicopter, they lower it, raise it, and then they're also considered the flight mechanic. So if anything goes wrong in flight, it's their job to repair it, or as soon as they land, it's their job to maintain the helicopter, like refueling, repairing, moving it with the tug where it may need to be. They also communicate with the pilot, and they're also the main spotter during search and rescue calls. For example, they're the ones who are keeping an eye out for any obstructions or any hazards to the flight. Because the pilot's kind of focused on hovering, of course. Moving on from hoist operator, we have our mission system operator, which operates on the C-130J Hercules. It's a FLIR camera on the front. The mission system operator, also known in short for MSO, they are air crews, so they perform fundamental like maintenance. So like you see the fuel truck here, they always bring that out at the start of the day, kind of check up the C-130, make sure everything's fine. They'll do the pre-flight checks. They'll get like the load in there because there's actually crates we load up into the C-130 that we can drop. So they help load that, and their main mission though is operating the FLIR camera. So C-130s are the long range asset. So as soon as the search and rescue call is coming in, since the C-130 is a little bit faster, we have the C-130 go out. They use the FLIR camera to find the people, and that's how we're able to find missing people. Moving on from mission system operator, we also have flight engineer. So MSO and flight engineer are unique to AET. That's one thing, so you can't do these two if you're an AMT. Anyways, flight engineer performs also the fundamental maintenance duties, but they also serve as more of a backup role, so they're filling in whatever is kind of missing or whatever needs to be done on the aircraft that the loadmaster MSO can't do. So the flight engineer sits in the cockpit. They operate the ramp doors and all the basic systems on the aircraft that the pilot can't operate while he's flying. They're also they're almost in a way a co-pilot because they do all the they handle all the basic controls that the pilot can't while he's flying. So flight engineer is probably the closest you can get to like a fixed wing pilot when you're enlisted. And then finally, loadmaster. I don't have a photo for it, but loadmaster loads up the stuff in the back of the C-130, and they are the guys who actually coordinate the drops. So if it's really dark out and the helicopter's having a hard time finding someone, or if, for example, we just need to drop some survival equipment for roleplay purposes down to a scene, they load this cargo right here that I'm kind of pointing at. It's that orange bin you can kind of see in the C-130. And then when they fly over the scene, they'll come back around, they'll line up with the scene, and then as soon as they're about to fly over, the loadmaster will time it, deploy the flare, and drop the cargo, and a flare will actually activate outside the container, and then will drop down to the missing people or the people in distress. So being a loadmaster is probably the most action-packed kind of job you can get for C-130. They do a lot of cool stuff. And disclaimer though, when you join as an AET or an AMT, you kind of get what's offered to you. If you do AET, you have a really good chance of ending up on the C-130. If you really want to do helicopters, I would recommend AMT because, as you can see, you have less of a chance of being on the C-130. Moving on to AMT. For AMT, they can be a hoist operator and loadmaster. That's all they can do. They can't do the more technical jobs of FLIR camera and flight engineer, and that's because electronics technicians are obviously the ones who work on the electronic systems of the aircraft, right? And then AST rescue swimmer, that's pretty obvious. They are the rescue swimmer. I don't think I need to go too far into that. Everyone who becomes an AST gets qualified as a rescue swimmer, so you're not going to be waiting on the ground for a while, waiting to get your wings or whatever. So, now let's go into what everyone's really here for. Pilot pathways. And I messed it up. Pilot pathways. So, there's officer candidate school, which is if you enlist in the Coast Guard, you have to be an E5. I believe for us, we don't really enforce that. You can be an E4, whatever. Most people are an E4 here. If you're aircrew operations, law enforcement, doesn't make a difference. When we open up applications, you can apply to OCS, and then if you're accepted, you can become a pilot through that. OCS isn't really as done for non-aviation jobs because non-aviation officer positions are more appointed by me or the executive officer. There's very few of those though, just operations officer and administrative officer. Direct flight entry is probably the most used because OCS is not that popular here. Direct flight entry is where anyone, any status can apply to become a pilot. Not everyone's going to get in, of course. However, we do prefer experience, and people who are still in the Coast Guard can apply when direct flight entry opens up as well, and they get preference. And anyone who's in a business, emergency services organization, or any sort of like role-playing role in Kodiak that's not just civilian will get some preference on that direct flight entry program. And then finally, we have the final pathway, which is Kodiak Flight School to Coast Guard lateral transfer. That only happens on demand when we're in need of pilots, so it's not a guaranteed option when you enter Kodiak Flight School that you'll get this. However, through the civilian flight school, which is ran by the airport, Kodiak Flight School, we will announce sometimes if we're on a pilot shortage or something that we're allowing a Coast Guard lateral transfer. And what that is basically is while you're working on your private pilot's license here in Kodiak to fly civilian aircraft or commercial license, whether it's helicopter or fixed wing, we will take you, let you finish your training through the Coast Guard's flight school. However, you have a 2-month commitment as a Coast Guard pilot. However, that's normally not a problem for us to get the person to agree on. So there is that opportunity, but do not enter Kodiak Flight School expecting to see it and then you just get stuck with doing the normal private pilot's license course. With that about concludes this PowerPoint or presentation. I just wanted to clear up the air on questions and everything. If you're interested in joining Kodiak or getting started in the Coast Guard, you can go to Kodiak Discord, which is .gg/Kodiak for now. If the invite expires, you can probably find the invite link on another Kodiak video. And then the Coast Guard Recruiting Discord, which is that long link right there. I'm not going to say it all. Alright. Thank you all for watching, and if you have any questions, please comment.